largest bridges in the world, symbolizing both pioneer vision and modern courage in the conquest of space and time. Between these two great bridges, in historic San Francisco Bay, is an inspiring tribute to the achievements of our time. Here is a dream come true, the Golden Gate International Exposition on man-made Treasure Island.
The 400-acre artificial island was built by the Army Corps of Engineers from 1936 to 1937 on the shoals of neighboring Yerba Buena Island. 300,000 tons of rocks was used to build a seawall around an existing sandbar, then followed by filling the interior with dredged material from the surrounding bay, which consisted of mud and sand. The federal government paid for its construction and 3 permanent buildings, which would serve as a potential future airport.
Treasure Island was constructed at the same time as the Bay Bridge, and it was a project of the Works Progress Administration to construct this island, which was initially used to host the Golden Gate International Exposition.
40 acres of fun, carnival gone wild, big and busy.
The intention was that it was going to become an airport after the exposition, but instead it was turned over to the Navy and became a military base for the next 50 years.
In 1941, the United States Navy moved on to Treasure Island as America prepared for World War II. The island became a major training and education center with 4.5 million personnel shipped overseas from Treasure Island. After the war ended in 1945, Treasure Island was slated to be an airport. Unfortunately, aviation had changed dramatically. The Pan Am Clippers were no longer in regular service, and the island was never developed as an airport. The Navy continued their presence on Treasure Island. During the Cold War years, the island was a major training center, supply depot, and embarkation station for American military efforts throughout the Pacific and Asia. Personnel trained on and shipped from Treasure Island supported American military activities in Korea, Vietnam, and the Persian Gulf.
The base was originally listed for closure by the Navy in 1993, and the city began a process in 1994 under the Redevelopment Agency, forming a citizens reuse committee to look at potential plans for the island's future. After the base closed in 1997, the Treasure Island Development Authority was created to develop and implement a reuse plan. The Navy has completed their environmental cleanup in that area, and last week the California Department of Public Health issued a radiological unrestricted reuse recommendation for that portion of Site 12. It's a big milestone for the project. Next Saturday,
the Treasure Island Development Authority Board was set up to implement the master plan that was adopted by the Board of Supervisors in 2011.
And given the importance of housing in the city, both the affordable component and the market rate housing, we felt that it was important to review what the housing plan is at Treasure Island.
The Treasure Island Development Authority is the body that actually oversees the implementation of the master plan. To make sure that the master plan, which was adopted by the Board of Supervisors and adopted by the city after many community meetings, that's the plan which the city approved. The members of the board are appointed by the mayor and the Board of Supervisors. The master plan is actually a very detailed plan, looking at the ecological aspects of the island, looking at the geotechnical aspects of the island, but also making sure that there is an envelope of development that is in keeping with what the original plan was, which is that we have up to 8,000 units of housing. There's retail and hotels, but also that there is open space and parks that are created. So it is an overall plan that guides the whole development of Treasure Island and Yerba Buena Island.
Materials used during the construction of Treasure Island severely compromises the integrity to build structures. In today's geotechnical engineering standards, Treasure Island's soil is being readdressed for soil stabilization for future development. A mechanical stabilization process is being used to consolidate the liquefaction of the mud and sandy soil.
Because Treasure Island is a man-made island, we do have to do a significant amount of soil improvement before we can build new infrastructure and new buildings on the island. In the foreground you see here is a process called surcharging, where we import additional topsoil to simulate the dead weight of the future buildings to be constructed at that site. So this is causing the bay mud that underlies the island to consolidate over time. And we can monitor that, and as that consolidation, primary consolidation is complete, then this soil will be removed to the intended finished floor elevation of the new structures.
Yeah, this is an emergency in San Francisco. What section of the West Grand Freeway has come down?
In the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, the ground level of this island dropped by 4 inches, pretty much uniformly across the island. The loose sand material that was placed here to build the island, when it gets hit by seismic forces, those sand particles move relative to each other and consolidate.
One of the processes to further stabilize the loose granular ground, a dynamic vibrocompaction rig, is used to densify the soil by high-frequency mechanical vibration.
The rig in the background has 4 H-piles that go down through the upper 50 feet of sandy material. And as they're extracted, they vibrate, causing that sand material to consolidate and settle. So as we do that process, we observe about 18 inches in settlement. So the ground level around that equipment will drop by 18 inches. So this causes that same type of event to happen through mechanical means rather than through a seismic event.
The dynamic vibrocompaction rig vibrates the soil every 4 square meters, then moved along to the next section. To further assure stability, tamping is followed around the site. Compaction takes approximately 3 to 4 months to complete 12 acres. Once the vibrocompaction and tamping is done, the area is backfilled where the ground has settled, then using laser alignments to assure a level surface to build on.
I think that every city, when they have the opportunity to do something that is as large as Treasure Island, because Treasure Island is 500 acres, and they do it to what their needs are at that time. And certainly 2011 till now, the most important pressing issue for the city is actually more housing. So there were 2 aspects to that master plan. One was to create a new district for San Francisco, 8,000 units of housing, of which there's all levels of affordability. But the other was to create 300 acres of open space and parks. Actually, it is the largest addition to the park system in San Francisco since the creation of Golden Gate Park, 300 acres. And this is a tremendous gift to the public, both the housing, which we desperately need in San Francisco, as well as an open space and park system, which really is going to be world-class, and it will attract people in San Francisco, but it will also attract people regionally as well as internationally.
In 2002, CMG architecture was brought to the Treasure Island project once the developer was awarded the exclusive negotiation agreement between the City of San Francisco and the United States Navy. CMG has earned national recognition and numerous awards for merits in design, social impact, and environmental stewardship.
We were part of the project in the very beginning when the developer initially was awarded the exclusive negotiation agreement, or the ENA, with the city. They partnered up with a planning and architecture group, and we joined that team to work with the developer and the city and the community to come up with the plans for Treasure Island. So there's quite a lot of open space in the master plan, and there's a couple of reasons for that that are very pragmatic. One is that the amount of area that could be converted for private use on Treasure Island was very limited. Actually, it wasn't allowed at all because Treasure Island was previously public open waters, and as such protected by the Tidelands Trust Act to be redeveloped for public use. But there was a land swap that was allowed and approved by the Governor of California, Governor Schwarzenegger, that allowed for some of the land on Treasure Island to be put into the public trust in a one-to-one swap for some land on Treasure Island to be taken out of the trust, which allowed it to be developed for private uses such as residential. And that amount of land was 89 acres, which leaves a whole bunch more space that cannot have housing on it. And the question was what to do with all of that space. There could be other public uses that are allowed, such as conference centers or museums or universities or things like of that nature. But what really made the most sense for this location was to have more parks in a really robust parks and open space plan. And that's what led us to the plan that we have now. The planting strategies for Treasure Island and Yerba Buena Island are to maximize habitat value in the park areas wherever appropriate and where we can, to create comfort at the pedestrian scale. There are these diagonal lines that go across the plan that you'll see. Those are windrow trees, much like you see in agricultural landscapes, where they're tall trees that buffer the wind to create more calm areas down at the pedestrian scale. So of course we do have some areas where we have play fields and surfaces where kids need to run around on, and those will be either lawns or, like you see in normal sports fields. Related to where the housing is on the island and its convenience to the walk to the transit hub, I mentioned that we're trying to create high quality pedestrian environments, and one of the unique innovations of Treasure Island is called the Shared Public Way, and it's a road that runs right down the middle of the neighborhoods. It's a curbless street. Cars are allowed to drive on it, but pedestrians are allowed to walk down the middle of the street, and cars have to yield the right of way to pedestrians. It's intended for streets where there's a very, very low traffic volumes and the traffic speeds are really low. So while cars are allowed, there's really not a lot of reasons for cars to go on that street. But it's just intended to create a much more social street that's much more pedestrian friendly and prioritizes pedestrians and bikes. One of the interesting things is working with all the architects that have been designing the buildings in this first phase to encourage them to create architecture that welcomes people to sit on it. It's almost like sticking its toe out and asking someone to sit on its toe, so that buildings actually integrate public seating and places for people to hang out at their base, which is really at the opposite of what you see oftentimes in the city, where there's defensive architecture that is really trying to keep people off of it. This is architecture that's trying to invite people to come and inhabit it at its base.
Incorporated in the landscape architect of Treasure Island are wetlands, which are designed to factor in coastal erosion control from incoming sea level rise, increased natural animal habitation, and stormwater runoff treatment.
There's different kinds of wetlands planned for Treasure Island, they all have slightly different purposes. There's stormwater wetlands that are treating the runoff from the island and filtering that water before it's released to the bay to improve the water quality in the bay and in the ocean. And the first phase of a large wetland infrastructure is what's built up on Yerba Buena Island to treat all the stormwater from Yerba Buena Island. We might see that when we go out there. There are tidal wetlands that are planned for the northern side of the island, where the sea level rise adaptation and flood protection for future sea level rise is held back away from the edge of the island to allow sea level rise to come onto the island to create future tidal wetlands, which are going to be really important for the health of the bay in the future as we see sea level rise starting to flood out certain existing wetlands. And there are some natural vernal pool wetlands also in the northern wilds that are capturing rainwater and holding them to create certain special types of habitat. So there's three sort of different purposes of the wetlands, primarily around water filtration and habitat creation.
Consumable sustainability was also incorporated in the redesigning of Treasure Island. Innovative urban farming is included in the plans to foster economic viability, conservation of water, and to promote ecological sustainability.
The urban agricultural farm is 20 acres in the middle of the island. It's a commercial farm that's meant to grow and produce food. It's not a community garden per se where the volunteers and the neighbors come out and grow their own. It's commercially run to maximize the food production, and that food will be distributed on the island. And interestingly, the urban farm is tied into the on-island wastewater treatment plant, which creates recycled water for use on the island, and so the water used to grow the food will come from a very sustainable source on island. And we're really trying to close these loops of water, food, and to create a new model for sustainability.
Part of the design for sustainable landscape was to incorporate natural stormwater garden filtering systems. The first of 3 natural stormwater gardens is here on Yerba Buena Island, and a total of 10 will be on Treasure Island. Water from storms, street runoffs from neighborhoods, has the possibility to collect toxic materials as it makes its way back into the surrounding bay. This garden has been a model for future natural filtering systems throughout the Bay Area.
So whenever a storm comes through, all of the water, it lands on the streets, it lands on the top of the buildings, and at times it often collects a lot of heavy metals, oils, and greases, and all of those need to be cleaned before it's sent back into the bay. So it's picked up off the roadway, it's put into the catch basins, into the pipes, into the stormwater drainage system, and then it's put here into our stormwater basin. And then all of the plants, all the soil media you're seeing in here, they're acting as a filter for all of those oils and heavy metals, all of the greases, all of those things that are coming off the roadways, coming off the development. And so it's treated here in the stormwater basin, and then it's sent out into the bay as a cleaner product, as a cleaner water, which increases our water quality, here and throughout the Bay Area. So the structure in the center of each basin is what we call the forebay. And so that's the point at which the stormwater exits out of the storm drainage system and into the stormwater basin itself. And so the forebay is shaped as almost a gate to kind of push all the water out through the pipe. And all of those rocks help to disperse it before it's sent out into the stormwater basin itself. The stormwater basin was designed to fill up to the height of the berms on the side that you're seeing here. So this is a species of juncus, and so these are all really well-known freshwater grasses that are found in any place around the Bay Area that you find standing water or in a drainage channel. You're going to find a lot of these juncus species. And so this is one of the really heavy lifters in a lot of the biotreatment. It helps to soak up a lot of the water, to soak up a lot of those contaminants and heavy metals. So it's kind of one of our backbone species. This one is called Artemisia douglasiana. The common name is mugwort. Obviously it's another beautiful plant, but it's also doing a lot of the heavy lifting and pulling those contaminants out of the stormwater, pulling the oil and everything to help treat the water before it's sent back into the system, back into the bay. This plant is known as Salvia spathacea, or hummingbird sage. It's got a lot of habitat value in that it is a very strong pollinator plant. Obviously you can see the pink and purple flowers which come up in the springtime and really attract a lot of hummingbirds, a lot of bees, which help to pollinate the other species within the garden and throughout the rest of the island and all of those native plant ecologies. All of these plants are designed to be able to take a heavy inundation of water over a several-day period, like standing water for a long time. All of these plants can withstand that and honestly thrive in that condition. So all of these were selected based on the ecological and habitat value, but also their treatment and functional value for the stormwater. Those came in super tiny. It was very much a big part of our design and master plan for the development of the island. It was a Navy base and a lot of Navy housing on this island specifically for around 80 years. And during that time, a lot of invasive species were introduced on the island. Eucalyptus, a lot of different kind of European and Algerian ivies started to proliferate across the island. And so when we came back onto the island, we wanted to make sure to try to bring in some of the original native ecologies that were here on the island before the Navy started to redevelop it and introduce some of those invasive species. And so a lot of the species you're seeing in this stormwater garden in the basins, as well as in a lot of the other upland areas, are a part of those types of ecologies that are trying to be returned to this side of the island, but also different other spaces throughout the island's development. So whenever we started this process, we identified a number of species of native plants that seemed applicable to the ecologies and the native ecologies we're trying to grow out here. There's probably 50 to 60 native species within the stormwater garden itself. And so a lot of those plants are actually very hard to find in the nursery trade. So we needed to grow all of those ourselves as a way to achieve the biodiversity that is inherent in the design here. And so as a part of that process, we brought on a nonprofit group called LEJ, L-E-J, who is Literacy for Environmental Justice. And so we brought them on to help us grow those plants and help us put together a lot of the plant palettes you're seeing out here.
During the Navy's possession of Treasure Island, most of the landscape was inundated with invasive plant species. Eradicating non-native vegetation and restoring indigenous native plants were part of the replanting design on both Yerba Buena Island and Treasure Island. Literacy for Environmental Justice, a community volunteer educational program involved with restoring local habitats and preserving San Francisco's unique biodiversity, teamed up with the Redevelopment Group to grow the 50,000 native plants to repopulate Treasure Island.
The city of San Francisco specifically set up some meetings between LEJ, CMG, and the developer. They came in with a high degree of expertise in urban design and architecture and green infrastructure, but they really hadn't worked with native plants at scale. And they were also kind of scratching their heads like, how are we going to grow 50,000 native plants from remnant native plant populations? It was a really unique partnership of like figuring out what plants can grow, what plants will function in stormwater gardens. Not all native plants are aesthetically pleasing to landscape architects. So we've kind of worked around like, what plants are going to be pleasant for people, what plants are going to provide habitat, what plants are going to actually be able to sequester carbon, deal with erosion, preserve some of the island's biodiversity, as well as like be able to manage all of the stormwater treatment on the island. There's about 33 naturally occurring native plant species that have survived the last 100 years on Yerba Buena Island, and we were able to go in and get the seed, actually salvage plants in some cases. Some of the development work that occurred was actually going to destroy native plant habitat, and we were able to go in before the bulldozers and before the roads were built and the new water tanks were installed and dig them up, divide them, hold them. I think of the 50,000 plants, we grew about 40,000 of them in-house, and the other 10, we had to kind of rely on our partners to do it. With this project of the 50,000 plants that we did approximately 100 species. And 95 of them are from the county of San Francisco. About the other 5 are from the state of California. But the other 95 species really are the native plants that have been here for thousands of years. We use collection sites such as like Angel Island. The Presidio provided genetics for the project in San Francisco. We used remnant plant habitats in Hunters Point, and we used a lot of genetics from San Bruno Mountain. Just to collect and process all of the genetics was a 2-year process, and then it was about a 2 or 3 year process to grow all the species. So this is the infamous Yerba Buena, and it's kind of like this low-growing, sprawling native herb, and it's in the mint family, and I'm just rubbing my hands on this, and it's extremely aromatic. It just feels like a flush of like peppermint just came across my face. It's edible. You can make tea out of it. It's a great digestive plant for settling your stomach. It's been really cool to introduce Yerba Buena to Yerba Buena. So the plant that we're looking at here is called Dutchman's pipe. And when it's in bloom, the flower actually looks like a Dutchman's pipe. And one other thing that's really unique about this plant is it's the host-specific plant for the pipevine swallowtail butterfly. So some butterflies are able to adapt to other species and can use larval and food sources from different plant species. Pipevine swallowtail butterfly can only use this plant. And in the county of San Francisco, there's only about 3 or 4 healthy populations of this plant. These particular plants were going to be destroyed because of the green infrastructure project. Needed to put pipes in and needed to demolish old water tanks and build new water tanks for the island. So we were able to go in, dig them up, cultivate them, extrapolate dozens of plants into hundreds of plants, and basically increase the unique biodiversity of the island through the restoration process. One day, one of my nursery managers was down here, and she found the pipevine butterfly had flown over from Yerba Buena Island, came over to our nursery on Treasure Island, and was breeding on this plant, and successfully did its life cycle inside of our nursery. So somehow that butterfly knows it's out there and will find it. This is kind of one of those unique things that we can't explain why butterflies can find this species, but if we grow it and put it in the right location, they will return. So the plant that we're looking at here is Dudleya farinosa, which is also known as just Dudleya or Live Forever. Due to the construction work that was happening in that area, it was likely to be destroyed. A unique thing about this plant, it's one of the few native succulents that we have in California, and the Live Forever plant can live to be 150 years old. Recently, the state of California just did special legislation to protect this plant. I think in its intact population on the island, there was probably less than 50 of them. So to be able to grow several hundred of them and have them be a part of the plant palette of the stormwater gardens that were installed recently is actually an increase of biodiversity and a step forward towards protecting the natural legacy of the island.
I moved to Treasure Island in 1999. I believe I was one of the first residents on the island. I've seen how the island has been destroyed and reconstructed since its beginning. To restore the island to its native form is extremely important to me because that will help all the animals come back to the island and make this place even a better place to live.
I wanted to volunteer here just because these are people that I know. So that was my first thing. It's just I wanted to come here to help out and be with nature and to actually just put my hand in some dirt. I feel like we as people don't really work in harmony with the earth as much as we should. And we don't see the benefits of plants, but I just learned about a plant that if you rub it enough, it turns into soap. That's cool. And we need those things. We need to know about those things.
One really unique thing about this project is the scale. To use 50,000 native plants over 7 acres is a scale that we have never seen. It really is trailblazing when we think about the 350 or 400 acres of open space that is planned for Treasure Island. It sets the stage for what is possible. There's a way to use nature-based solutions at scale to meet the needs of climate change, sea level rise, the crisis of local extinction, and really try to create connections to the natural environment in a meaningful way. So I believe that the work with this first phase of the project sets a stage for what is possible, and I just feel really blessed to have been a part of it.
One of the main focuses on Treasure Island is keeping vehicle traffic to a minimum. For residents and visitors, public transportation is highly encouraged, and will be the center point of keeping the island pedestrian-friendly, retaining an open space concept, and providing an ecosystem that reduces carbon emissions.
We need the transit to be successful, because if we had 8,000 new homes here and everybody was trying to use their car to access the Bay Bridge each morning, it would overwhelm the ramp system and the roadway system of the island. As part of the development of the island, new on and off ramps from the Bay Bridge are being constructed, but overall, the focus of the development is to be very transit oriented. Treasure Island itself is very flat and very bikeable and walkable as a result. And so there's a focus on using both bus and ferry service to get from the island to San Francisco and the East Bay. There will also be a number of transit demand management tools that will be employed. The two new ramps to and from the island will be metered, only allowing a limited number of cars to access the bridge. And there will also be a congestion management toll to encourage the use of transit. All of the market rate housing on the island, the price for residential unit, whether that's a rental apartment or a for sale condominium, the price of the unit is decoupled from the price of the parking spot. So people can buy a condominium without needing to pay for a parking spot. If they choose to have a parking spot, they would pay an additional price for that. All market rate residents also are required to purchase a transit pass each month through their HOA fees or through their rent, so that residents will begin the decision of driving or taking transit with a transit pass in hand each month. That transit pass will function as a Muni Fast Pass, allowing people to take Muni and transfer within the Muni network. It'll also function as an AC Transit System Pass, allowing people to take AC Transit to the East Bay and transfer within the AC Transit system. And it'll also provide unlimited access to the Treasure Island Ferry.
Treasure Island is going to take decades to be fully built out. It's going to take some time for it to reach the envelope that was originally passed by the Board of Supervisors, and maybe there's going to be changes to it as well. We don't know what's going to happen in 30 or 50 years, but I'm comforted by the fact that the plan that was adopted was really forward-thinking, even for its time. And we're building the island in such a way that is sustainable, that addresses sea level rise, but also gives the public the open space and parks that are so necessary to city life. There's economic, certainly challenges, and whether we're going to be able to build out all of what was desired in the master plan, time will tell. But I think that the last 10 years, we've been coming to this point. We are seeing incredible progress, and the infrastructure is being finished on the island. The first market rate housing is being finished. The first affordable housing is being finished. And so we feel that, within the next 5 years, a substantial part of what we had envisioned is going to come to fruition.